lots of news. And it wasn't always good news though. I'm grateful for the news I was able to tell and be a part of, but we also have the reality of sometimes being in the news when you are being smeared by every right-wing media outlet in the country. So I want to go back a little bit so we can go forward and maybe we can learn some lessons in the personal experiences that I've had as a Muslim telling our story and my story in this country. So I've been for 37 years, I've been Palestinian since the day I was born. I've also been Muslim for 37 years. I've also been a supporter of BDS for at least publicly for the past maybe 6 or 7 years. There's really nothing new about my politics. I have been working on issues of police accountability for about 14 years in a place like New York City. I've been an immigrant rights activist for the past 17 years. Nothing new about me. But what became more apparent is that my profile started rising. So it wasn't that my politics changed or my identity changed. It was that my positions were now more available or accessible to people outside of our community. So then the Women's March happens, right? Up until today, the Women's March on Washington is the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. That's just fact of the matter. So, why did I join the Women's March on Washington? Your sister Linda does not have extra time to be organizing the largest protest in U.S. history. I don't have extra time. One of the reasons why was when I was approached to be one of the national co-chairs of the Women's March on Washington, I thought about you. I thought about our community. I thought about the opportunity that it was going to give us to see a Palestinian Muslim American woman in hijab on a national stage in opposition to a racist, authoritarian regime, right? A Muslim woman leading a resistance with other women from across the country. So I thought about the news making in it. I thought about what kind of story does it tell about our community that in 2017, we as Muslims will be leading the resistance. So that's what I thought about. So I took a leave from my work, and I worked for 7 weeks full-time on the Women's March. And my job for the Women's March and my role was I was the fundraiser. Because you know, some of us Muslims were good at that. We know how to ask people for money. At least I know how to. And people didn't believe in us. And one of the things that I chose not to do during the Women's March is I chose not to take corporate dollars. I said I will not stand on the stage with Coca-Cola or Walmart, like I'm just not going to do that. And people called us crazy. They said, I don't know why you put her at the head of fundraiser, this is not going to work. And mashallah, we raised almost $4 million online from ordinary people. Many people actually from the Muslim community. I called donors across the country and I said I would love for them to see Muslim names of people supporting this march. And we had our allies and friends from across the country, ACLU and Move On and so forth. So then when the Women's March date came on January 21st, we organized the march for about 250,000 people and about 1 million extra came. And there were marches all over the country, huge marches in places like Chicago and Los Angeles and Albuquerque, New Mexico and Florida. You name it, you name the state, there was a march there. There were states where they never saw mobilizations in their state until they joined and participated in the Women's March on Washington. Now the reason why I'm telling you this right now is because the Women's March happens, your sister goes on stage, and she says to people all over the world that I am unapologetically Muslim American, and I'm unapologetically Palestinian American, and that I am my Palestinian grandmother's who lives under military occupation in Palestine. I am her wildest dreams manifested here in the United States of America. And then Monday came. Monday came after the march. And every right-wing media outlet in the country, every right-wing Zionist outlet in the country engaged in coordinated attacks against me to discredit my leadership. But sisters and brothers, they didn't win the first time around. And it was because, as Muslims, in order for us to maintain our leadership positions in this country, to Layla's point, is we cannot be just Muslims who stand up for Muslim issues or what we think are Muslim issues. That I have chosen to be a Muslim in its full form and to stand up against all and any injustice regardless of who that injustice is against. Which gained me allies across this country, from elected officials to organizers to people from across the spectrum, even people who do not agree with me, stood up for me and defended me. So that happened. And they tried for a few days and they had to they were silenced. They just couldn't, it didn't work. So then a few months later, I was invited to be the CUNY commencement speaker for a graduation, a college graduation. Nothing extraordinary about it. I have spoken at 140 campuses across this country. And the right wing came out again to call on the City University of New York to rescind my invitation. So I made every headline. Washington Post, the New York Times, the New York Post, the New York Daily News, Fox News, you name it, they were talking about me. And what was interesting about that conversation is that there were people that I was the center of a controversy and people had to reckon with me as a Muslim woman, and do I deserve freedom of speech? What is the role of Muslims and who I am and what I have been doing, right? And it created a national conversation. I didn't even have to say anything. A national conversation happened. So when you're a newsmaker, it doesn't mean you're just a journalist or just the person who goes on MSNBC. We as a Muslim community have the opportunity to start infusing a conversation or framing a conversation that needs to be had. So I have been able to create many conversations. Number one, elevating a conversation about boycott, divestment, and sanctions. There are people and Palestinians and solidarity activists who have been working on the issue of BDS for a long time. They have dedicated their lives to that issue. But because I am privileged to have a platform, that I have been able to have our country reckon with this conversation about what does it mean for a Muslim or a Palestinian American to be part of the resistance and to be working with allies who are now taking up the cause of BDS and supporting the Palestinian people. So what I'm saying to you is, don't be afraid to be the center of controversy. Sometimes being the center of controversy does bring a lot of hatred. I have gotten death threats. You name it, I've been through it. I have to read my names in newspapers about how I'm a terrorist sympathizer and a lot of other outrageous and outlandish claims. But I've also allowed people to learn more about our community through me being the center of controversy. And why is that? Because oftentimes in the Muslim community, a lot of newsmakers and people who are in the media in the Muslim community do make a couple of mistakes. Number one, they go on national television to tell people what they think people want to hear. I don't care what people want to hear about our community. I do not go on national television to tell people I am so proud to be an American. I am just as American as you are. I am just like you. You have to do this for me because, no. I go on national television to put forth a principled, unequivocal position and to challenge the very frame that the media tries to put us in every time a Muslim is called on national television. I will not be on a national platform condemning terrorism as a Muslim. I will only condemn terrorism as a human being because that is the only place that we should be condemning terrorism, because terrorism should never be framed as a conversation that should be just had with Muslims in a country where white supremacists have killed more people since 9/11 than Muslims have. There's facts that we have to work on. We also have a responsibility as a community to frame the discussions and push back when somebody asks you a question. You don't have to answer the question, sisters and brothers. In the media, if you can learn anything from my experiences, when you get asked the question, you know what I do? I just say whatever I want, even if it has nothing to do with the question I was asking. Because you have the freedom to say what you want. So what I'm saying to you is, speak the truth, challenge the frame, do not say what you think people want to hear. You are worthy, you are already a human And we are not, as a community, to go on national television and to beg for the respect that we already deserve as a community. And I will give you an example. When we are called to talk about what is happening on the other side of the world, and we're here to talk about issues of refugees, for example, right? We have to be able to push back and say, who created those refugees, right? When we talk about ISIS, everyone's always like, ISIS this, Did anybody here, was ISIS around 15 years ago? 10 years ago? 7 years ago? Why do I have to explain to everybody where ISIS came from? We have to challenge that the frame that the media puts us in to say, as an example, right? That we have to get to the root of the problem when it comes to terrorism. The root of the problem doesn't come from within the Muslim community. It comes from a politicized foreign policy of war on our people, and those most directly impacted by groups like ISIS and wars are Muslims. So I don't know why we have to defend ourselves in the media when we are not the ones who created the problem that we are often asked to defend or to connect ourselves or disconnect ourselves from. So wrapping up, sisters and brothers, if you are ever called to be in the media, it's not for everybody. So what I'm saying to you here today is not that everybody in this room should be in the media. Being a media representative takes a lot of responsibility, sisters and brothers. You cannot just be anybody and go on Fox News. You cannot just be anybody and be a spokesperson on behalf of the Muslim community. It takes training. I'm a trained media professional. I didn't wake up one morning 15 years ago and Sister Linda was already trained and I went on national television. It took me 10 years till I embraced a CNN platform or an MSNBC platform or an Al Jazeera platform. It requires training. Also, you cannot go up on national television and ever say, you have never heard Sister Linda say this. You can never go on national television and say, I am here today to represent all Muslims in America. I do not represent all Muslims in America. I represent Linda and my perspective as a Muslim that may be shared across the community, but we have to be very careful about trying to represent 1.7 billion Muslims, because you know why? Because then you get put back in the frame of why we as 1.7 billion Muslims have to answer to acts of terror that have nothing to do with us. So always speak from the I and put forth your perspective. And media also isn't just being on television. Media is about writing op-eds, it's about writing letters to the editors in your local newspapers. Media is about creating videos, your own videos, it's about creating blogs, and it's also about Muslims investing not just in building another $10 million masjid, but investing in public relations and media PR firms in the Muslim community, because right now that is what we are lacking. We are lacking the media professionalism that we need as a community to tell our own stories from our own fame, and we need to be focusing on doing that. Lastly, I will say, parents, please stop telling your kids to be doctors, lawyers, and engineers. Plenty of those in the Muslim community, mashallah. More doctors than we need and more engineers than we need. I need journalists. I need media makers. I need producers. These are jobs that our kids can easily get, because media outlets across this country are looking for bilingual folks, they're looking for Muslims, they're looking for people who have different perspectives to come and infuse into the larger media industry. So allow your children to explore other options, and one of the areas where we are lacking and why we are not being represented in the media is because we are not in the media. So don't blame the media that they're biased against you if you are not in there being able to tell the story, which is why we get so much good content out of Al Jazeera, because both AJ Plus and Al Jazeera, because we got our people on the inside that can help frame those stories and pitch those stories about our community. So I want our young people to be encouraged to be part of a very successful industry, which is media making.